All right, Matthew Sciba, thank you for joining us today.
Yes, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So can you give us a sense of just what your professional background is and what you're up to right now?
So I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm in a private practice setting, and I received training by the grace of God through David Pickup at the beginning of my career. David Pickup, some of you may know, is a world-renowned marriage and family therapist who helps men overcome unwanted same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria. And at the beginning of my career, a number of men started showing up to my office saying they needed help with this. And I said, come on in, sit down, and scrambled to find who's the expert, who's doing this, who can teach me how to do this, how to help men overcome unwanted same-sex attraction. And David Pickup lived 90 miles away. And I got in touch with him and spent the next 2 years working for him, helping people, or in learning how to help people through reintegrative therapy. So
Gotcha.
that was a great foundation. And my experience with David Pickup, I just had a great exposure to a simpler form of things. So in grad school and in supervision, I had learned, use the DSM-5. You have to find, it was essentially, you had to become an expert in everything in order to be able to treat everything. And the reality is that that's not the case. Most things have this very similar root problem, which is lack of integration of the emotions into the daily and moment-to-moment life. So through learning reintegrative therapy, almost all of that was just simply reintegrating your emotions. They're just more severe cases than things like anxiety or anger problems. But when I've taken this approach, this is what people have experienced. So the approach being, what are your emotions at the moment? Don't act on them. We have an intellect and emotions. And so use your intellect to make your choices, but allow your emotions to be there. Allow yourself to experience them. And I've applied this across the board, regardless of what people are struggling with. And they just experience this wholeness, this reintegrative experience, because most people aren't taught how to feel. So this has been kind of my journey of counseling, is learning how to help people, learning how to help people suffer better, how to be okay with the suffering they experience, and going back to root causes. So that's the primary focus, is I help people with unwanted same-sex attraction, gender dysphoria, pornography, addictions, but I get a whole smattering of other types of cases in there, and we all go with the same approach.
How long does it take to help someone with that?
It depends on the client. I've had, and this is extraordinarily rare, but I've had some clients that were past unwanted same-sex attraction, like their attraction was gone within 6 sessions. Usually it takes somewhere between, depending on the person, 6 months to 2 years. I have had clients that are longer. They had complicating factors like the COVID lockdown, for example, that makes everything difficult. You go from trying to help unwanted same-sex attraction into trying to keep people from killing themselves or drinking themselves to death. So the goal of therapy at that point kind of switched to just maintaining a life without self-destruction. And then once the COVID lockdown was over and they were able to return to normal life, then we were able to do that and get back on the goal of overcoming same-sex attraction. So there have been 1 or 2 cases, maybe a few more, where put this away. There we go. Where the case was longer for other reasons. Maybe there was some borderline personality disorder, alcoholism, things like that. But generally it's 6 months to 2 years. Sometimes people overcome same-sex attraction and they say, hey, this is great. Sometimes they just reach a place of peace. They're kind of not okay in that feeling of, I don't like the same-sex attraction. They get into a panic about it. They have a lot of anxiety about it. And sometimes they reach this point of, you know what, I'm at peace about it, and being at peace about it has taken away my anxiety, my depression. My
Right.
value is no longer in do I have same-sex attraction or not. My value is now in what's my experience of life as a child of God, what's my experience of life, what is my state in life, and can I be at peace in that state in life? And so they kind of reach this good enough sort of place, a place of peace, like I said, of, hey, I can go about my life. I feel a lot better than I did before, and I'd like to just go live out in the world now. They're not taking up the gay lifestyle, but they're just experiencing themselves on a deeper emotional level for the first time, and they enjoy that and want to take a break from counseling and just live in that peace.
To me, that sounds a lot like an acceptance and commitment therapy approach, which is what I'm a big fan of. So tell me if this sounds right to you. But the
Sure.
way I kind of conceptualize it would be, we have ideals or a life of virtue that we're striving for. That these positive guides to behavior we can never fully achieve, that bring out the best in us. And on the other hand, we have emotions, either desires or fears or negative emotions that can draw us away from that ideal life if we just try to give into the satisfying those emotions, making those emotions go away. So someone with unwanted same-sex attraction, it's unwanted. That's not part of their ideals for life.
Right.
But they can experience those unwanted emotions, but it doesn't have to affect their actions. It doesn't have to control what they commit to and a fulfilling life that they live. Does that fit with your conceptualization?
It does sound very, very similar.
Okay.
And that is generally, and we do a lot of body work in session. That's generally what we're trying to do, is allow them to experience their emotions, not only in the present, but also connecting with things that occurred in the past. So that's what I try to do with most of my clients, regardless of what they're struggling with, is allow them to sit in those feelings, allow them to be there, allow them to experience it, experience the whole physiological reality of it, and just let it be. Basically, going through the emotions is the quickest way out. You can bottle them up and you'll keep them for until they want to come out, until you stop distracting yourself. Or you can numb them out, but they're still going to want to be dealt with. You just kind of compound them until you let yourself feel them. So
exactly,
we do a lot of. It's fun. It's like using body work as a time machine. So somebody will come in and say, "Hey, I have this experience from Friday. I had a lot of anxiety, I had a panic attack, or I had a lot of depression, or a lot of shame, or something." And I'll say, well, put your mind back to that moment on Friday when you had this experience of strong emotions, and then put your mind on your body and what your body physically felt like at that moment. Tell me a little bit about what your body felt like. So they'll tell me about the bodily experience, maybe the tension in the chest, maybe the sickness in the pit of the stomach, maybe the collapse of the head and shoulders and chest. And I'll put them in that, just not make them feel it again, but put their mind on what that felt like. And then say, after a few minutes, when's an earlier time in your life that you felt that? And so many times it comes right up. Oh, in 6th grade when, this kid bullied me. Okay, how about earlier than that? When I was 7 years old and I did this thing and dad yelled at me, or mom yelled at me. Okay, great. So it's like the body and the mind are connected in a physiological response, almost like when your brain is telling your body to release hormones, your brain keeps a log. And so you have these different hormones that cause different changes throughout the body, the different sensations that are occurring in the muscles and the tissues. And so your brain's keeping a log of all these things that are also connected to the same moment of the emotional experience. So allowing them to go through this time machine sort of experience. That moment at 7 years old when dad yelled at him for this, and that moment in 6th grade when he was bullied, all connect in that log to what they experienced on Friday. And so going back to the 7-year-old and allowing the person to have compassion on themselves, have pity for themselves, connect with that 7-year-old boy, and allow them to have that emotional experience of it. It's not a reliving, it's more of what is that boy experiencing? What is, on an emotional level, what does he need in that moment? And then do you have compassion, understanding? And if they say, no, I don't have compassion for him, well, how come? Because he's responsible for this. He's responsible for what I am going through now. They have to reconnect with that boy because that boy is a part of them. So getting them to a place of compassion and a place of understanding. It doesn't mean it's necessarily excusing the behavior. It's just simply, okay, I understand what he was going through in that moment, and I moved by his experience of it, is what helps to heal this experience. And so what then they experienced on Friday in their panic attack is just not as severe as it was 20 minutes ago. So it is not only incorporating the emotions now, but also recognizing what were the emotions that you experienced back then, and then what needs did you have, and do you have compassion on yourself for having gone through that? So it's a present and a past experience.
It sounds like it's bringing together some components from different treatment approaches that I'm familiar with. So one thing is kind of self-compassion. So being understanding towards yourself, understanding your weaknesses, that we have a shared common humanity that is frail. It also it takes the body work, takes mindfulness. It's like a mindfulness exercise, being aware of what you're feeling physically. It's like interoceptive mindfulness. And then the other component, almost like an internal family systems of the parts work, like healing the parts of yourself. In this case, it's like the past self and future self. So, and then you use the same approach with pornography addiction. Okay.
And for whatever reason, my approach, my personality, the reintegrative tools work extraordinarily well for 12 and 13-year-old girls who have eating disorders.
Interesting.
That's the niche that I have found myself in, and it seems to work tremendously well. I've had girls who were 13 years old who were supposed to be 110, 120 pounds at 80 pounds. And they come in and we do this, these same sort of experiences, and work out some things in the family. And then they don't have a problem with eating disorders anymore. They're not withholding food. They start eating and have no thought about it. And the other component to this, part of reintegrative therapy, is a thing called image transformation therapy, which was developed by Dr. Robert Miller, who is a psychologist at, he's in California now. He was at Camp Pendleton, U.S. Marine Corps base, and he was trying to find something gentler for PTSD, for combat veterans, than EMDR. And he came up with this, where you don't have to recall anything in detail, just make it plain and simple. So the best that I've been able to figure, and I've talked to a few doctors about what's actually going on in the body when this happens, is so the basic layout of image transformation therapy is this. You have some feeling, some emotion in your body, and you can use your brain to kind of reprogram that emotion, especially when it's connected to a particular memory. So if somebody comes in and they say they have anxiety, I'll ask them on a scale of 0 to 10, how intense is the feeling of anxiety? Oh, it's a 7. Okay. What color is the feeling of anxiety? And then where is that color located in your body? Because you can't see a feeling, but you can see a color. And the brain seems to play along with this game. Oh, okay. Anxiety is now the color purple. Great. Fantastic. Got it. And the brain just follows along. And then take that, where's the purple in your body? It's in my chest, it's in the pit of my stomach, it's in my head, it's in my shoulders. Great. Take that purple and imagine breaking it apart into a billion tiny little particles, like glitter or sand crystals or broken glass or something. So the client does this. Now imagine, and basically you just tell them to wash it out of the body. Robert Miller uses, I think it's 42 different steps to clear all of these different colored particles out of the body. But it's not just simply something that happens in the mind. There's an occurrence in the physical body as well. There's some kind of release of other hormones in the body that those sensations associated with that emotion are now changed into something else. So they experience, after clearing all of these particles out, they experience very often just a feeling of being light, releasing. They just feel looser and more at ease, more relaxed. And it seems to stick because we use the Likert scale every time. So the beginning of that exercise, after that exercise, the next week, 2 weeks later. So after you do the color exercise, you take the image and you say, break it apart into a billion tiny particles. What's the image of anxiety that comes to your mind? Maybe it's, me, looking anxious. Put it up on the wall, break it apart into a billion tiny little particles with your mind. All right, now make all the tiny particles disappear. And you do this over and over till they just can't see the image anymore. They can't bring it up even if they try. They say, I remember what it looks like, but I can't see it. And then you again wash all the particles of that image out of the body. And so then I ask them the next session, you remember that image? Yeah, I remember what it was like. Or maybe, yeah, I can see it. Okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how intense is the anxiety when you're looking at that image? And it sticks over and over and over. So we do this on all of the foundational memories of anxiety. Or so eating disorder is a little bit more complicated and yet straightforward. The exercise is a little more complicated, but only by a little. So an eating disorder essentially boils down to, I don't have power, therefore restricting food gives me a feeling of power or a feeling of control. So therefore I'm going to withhold food because nothing else in my life is under my control. And so I would say, what's the image of that withholding food connected with a feeling of power or control? Oh, it's me sitting in the closet with a bag of donuts. Okay, so take that image and what color is that feeling of powerful? So now the feeling is in the image, not in the body. What color is the feeling of powerful? Oh, it's blue. Okay, blue's powerful. Great. Now drain all the blue out of the image and then break it apart and make the image disappear. You do this over and over. And the emotional connection with that initial memory. So the mind saying, there's a lack here, we're not feeling power. Oh, but if I go eat the bag of donuts in the closet, I have the feeling of power or control. Now you're disconnecting the brain from the feeling of control with eating a bag of donuts and the satisfaction that came with that. So the brain's going, okay, now we got to figure out a new way to feel power and control. And then you treat that feeling of power less. When did you feel powerless? Now you drain that out of the body and then break the image apart and make that disappear. That's associated with the powerless feelings. So you just deal with the powerful and the powerless feelings in a similar way. And then the brain is no longer connected to, when I feel powerless, go eat the bag of donuts, because the first time I ate the bag of donuts in the closet, it was so satisfying. It's so satisfying that I'm going to try and relive that. So you've disconnected those things. And so the child then is able to be free of that connection. And they are okay with the feeling of powerless. They say, it's all right to feel powerless. Now with the children, of course, there's something extra that we have to work with the parents, because children are a product of their environment. So we do some coaching with the parents and figure out where it is the child's experiencing that powerless feeling, that lack of control feeling, and then work to remedy that in the family, however that looks. But that's been extraordinarily quick for many of these little girls, between 4 sessions and 6 months usually, and they're eating again. And it's not a matter of willpower. It's not a matter of, oh, I can't make myself eat, I don't want to eat. It's not the fights. So it's extraordinarily powerful. But that's the other aspect of reintegrative therapy, is just the clearing out the emotional debris that's keeping you stuck. And this works for the pornography addictions. This works for the same-sex attraction, although you have to do it on a number of other memories and experiences with same-sex attraction, because it's just a much more severe experience on the psychological and emotional level. I mean, if you think of all of these things as on a continuum, I think the same-sex attraction, gender dysphoria, is a collection of psychological and emotional symptoms that signify a much more intense emotional trauma, psychological trauma from earlier in childhood. Now, some kids just don't have a very strong sense of identity, and so when they go off to college and they experience this, all of a sudden they're trans, their lack of a strong sense of identity, they easily fit into the LGBT community, and they go, oh, these people love me, and there's a lot of feelings, and this is great and wonderful, and they're just kind of taken off guard. And most of these cases resolve. 90% of these cases resolve on their own over time, when they get their feet under them as a human being, as an adult. So they're just kind of taken unaware a lot of times. But the ones that are real severe cases, there's severe childhood neglect or trauma involved. And it's not necessarily sexual abuse. It's psychological and emotional abuse and neglect. So, but it's all on a continuum. Some anxiety is on the same continuum. It's just much less severe. And the temperament makeup of the child is a little bit different.
So you referenced the research that 90% of people experience gender dysphoria. Statistics are maybe slightly different depending on the study, but it resolves around adulthood, early adulthood.
It seems to be within, I think the one that I recall was within 12 years, and that's without any therapy.
Right. So, and now I'm curious with unwanted same-sex attraction. How many, just anecdotally, what proportion of the people you see experience that unwanted attraction, just like for as long as you're aware of, versus at a certain point, like they're done with it and they just don't experience it anymore?
So you're asking how many actually don't have the same-sex attraction anymore,
right,
through the course of counseling?
Yeah, exactly. Versus like they have it, but they learn to manage it and live the life that that's according to their ideals.
Right. So out of everybody that actually starts counseling, it's probably a third completely overcome unwanted same-sex attraction. And then probably a third reach that place of peace and say, I'm just okay with living like this. This was great. And then a third usually just fizzle out, either lack of connection, lack of funds. Maybe we're not a good fit working together, or they've found a mentor or somebody else that really connects with them. A lot of guys want somebody who's had same-sex attraction to help them out of their same-sex attraction, and I've never experienced same-sex attraction, so I just can't fulfill that for them. They want somebody they can connect with, to know that they're not the only ones that have been through this. They want a guide out of the cave, somebody who's already been through the cave. And I'm just not that person. But for others, they just show up and they want the pain to end, and they say, all right, well, here you go. Do what you can do with this. And I go, That's not how this works. But that seems to be across the board with a whole variety of clients. People who just want
Right.
the pain to end and they don't want real transformation.
Right.
So, I'd say it's probably a third overcome unwanted same-sex attraction. A third of them come to a place of peace with it, and a third of them just don't continue for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. To your point of people who just want to make the pain go away, that, yeah, I think that is very common, especially with people with
Yeah.
emotional disorders.
Yeah.
And maybe that could even be like indicative of having an emotional disorder, is seeing the unwanted emotion as a disorder. Because I think just our human condition, all of us experience desires that we know we shouldn't act on. It's not good for us to act on. And we're going to experience those desires for the rest of our life. So it's really about, well, how do you respond in the face of those desires rather than just totally eliminating those desires, which is not possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we're taught from childhood that those feelings are bad and should not be experienced. Like not keeping score at a soccer game for children. It's no. We can't let any children think that they've lost. We can't allow them to go through the sense of grief of we lost, we weren't as good as the others. We can't teach them to be happy for the other team either. We have to eliminate anything that might cause bad feelings. We're going to give all the kids a trophy because we can't possibly say, sorry, kid, you weren't good enough to win the first place trophy. Y'all had a great time. You did a good job. It's not good enough to warrant a trophy. No, everybody needs a trophy because we cannot let children suffer. We cannot teach them, yeah, it's okay to be sad that you didn't win first place. We can't do that. So we're all taught this. People are not taught that there are decisions that you make in your life that will have consequences for the rest of your life. And they're not necessarily good decisions. Maybe you marry the wrong person. Maybe a woman was on birth control and now she's infertile because she was on birth control. And there's just some things you cannot undo. You can't get those back. And so rather than teaching people, it's okay, you made a mistake. Yes, some mistakes are lifelong. And it's okay to be sad about that. It's okay to grieve that. We tell people, let's teach you how to cope. When those feelings come up, just breathe your way through it. Or think of these other things. It's distract. Don't allow that feeling to creep in. Don't allow yourself to suffer. Don't allow yourself to say, I'm really sad about that. Life is unfair. And I'm sad that life is unfair. My expectations of life and the reality of life do not match up, and I'm the weakest link. I'm just going to allow myself to be sad about that for a little while, to go through that grief, and then pick myself up and move on. People aren't taught how to do that anymore. So that, even with reintegrative therapy, we have these great tools, but that's one of the big pieces of helping people, even with same-sex attraction and the rest, is I didn't get the dad that I needed. I didn't get all of these things fulfilled. And I have a giant hole in my heart, and I'm really sad about that. Now my dad's gone, and I can't get a dad, which is the longing of the heart of the man with same-sex attraction, is I want all this affection from my dad. And so it's allowing yourself to say, okay, I'm sad about that. It's okay that I didn't get what I needed. Because the reality is you're still alive. You can still be fulfilled. It's just the hyperfixation on the pain and trying to get rid of it that keeps people stuck. Instead, connecting with it and saying, okay, it's all right to be sad about that. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of being treated well, even today. And I can look back at that kid and say, I have pity on him. It was not his fault. We're not even going to assign fault necessarily. We have to name it, though, in order to be able to identify what was it that caused this. So, yeah, he didn't have the dad that he needed. He didn't have the dad build him up. And that's a sad thing. And I'll never be able to fill that hole, especially with acting out, because that's what it is I want a hug from my dad. Gets eroticized and turned into, I want to act out with other men. But they're still all looking for that big hug. And so it's the realization that, well, you're not going to get it. but that's going to be okay. And having compassion, going through the grief, allowing yourself to experience those painful emotions that we're taught by not keeping score in soccer and by getting participation trophies. We're taught that it's bad. So I'm teaching people that it's good. It's healthy to experience those things. It's healthy to recognize that your expectations and that reality don't match up. And it's okay. You're not going to live 100% perfect life. Nobody does. You may have 50%, but what can you do with the 50%? And in the meantime, in order to move into that healthy experience of the 50%, you have to grieve the past. Grieve those things that are still picking at you.
That's really interesting work. And hey, I congratulate you for doing this work. There's several questions that come to mind that maybe hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about in the future. For example, I have one ethical question regarding reintegrative therapy, which I won't get into in detail here. Also, I'm curious, like people who have fear of same-sex attraction, what proportion of those is it actually a symptom of obsessive compulsive disorder, because that can be a symptom of OCD. And then finally, I'd like to hear if what kind of pushback you've gotten for the work you do, because it can be very countercultural. So I just congratulate you on your integrity and courage for doing this. But unfortunately, I think we'll have to pause it here. So we may have to do a part 2.
Sounds good.
Is there do you have any last words for us, or where we can find you?
So you can find me at thefreedomclinic.net. That's my website. Final words, let yourself feel all the bad feelings, because they're not actually bad. God created us with the ability to feel all of these things. And Adam and Eve, when they were kicked out of the garden, they experienced some sadness, regret, grief, all of these things. And just trying to cope would never actually move them forward. No, let's distract with these things, with those things. They had to come to the realization, the sadness of, okay, made a mistake and we broke our relationship with God. I don't want to break my relationship with God. I want to stay connected. But so there's definitely a spiritual component here that we could definitely do another show based on the spiritual component, because there are just the basic things that people don't understand. But even without the spiritual, even without talking about the relationship with God, just allowing yourself to feel pain, to feel sadness. I saw a little quote it was a little video clip of Matthew McConaughey, and he says, we need to spend more time in silence and not enjoying the company. So not enjoying being around yourself. Why don't you enjoy being around yourself? Well, there are a lot of things you need to work out, a lot of feelings you need to feel. So being in your house, if you're alone, being in your office, if you're alone, and not having anything on to distract you, and really disliking it, and then growing through the disliking it, because there are a lot of things there. It's indicative that you have unresolved issues to the degree that you're not even okay being silent with yourself. And, I always think of these old guys who sit on the porch. You see them in the movies, or sometimes driving through small towns. They're sitting on the porch. There's nothing going on. They're just watching cars pass. But they are comfortable in their own skin in that moment. They're staying there with themselves, not distracting with electronic devices or music, or not playing cards. They're just sitting and being quiet and enjoying the company, enjoying themselves, being at peace with themselves. This is kind of the visual, the analogy that we ought to try to reach. Allow yourself to experience the pain, loneliness, sadness, feelings of abandonment, feelings of rejection, disappointment, the feelings of shame. I made a big mistake. And it's okay to feel that shame. It's okay to feel that guilt. I made a big mistake with my life. There's a lot of pain associated with that. Don't so much stay in the head about it, but staying in the heart about it, feeling your way through it. So becoming more comfortable with the company.
Well
I think
said.
that's the key.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, Matthew.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Johann.